Welcome back to Stepwise. I hope you found our first several podcasts have lived up to their billing. Great conversations with inspiring leaders. This one is no exception. Today's guest is Paul Vivano, CEO and President of Children's Hospital of Los Angeles and Board Chair of Loyola Marymount University. In fact, he's been in CEO positions since the tender age of 26, a few years ago, and has served for-profit and not-for-profit healthcare institutions in those 4+ decades. Now, in full disclosure, I've known Paul for much of that time, and while serving him as his coach for well over 25 years, he's been one of my very few mentors. I've learned from him the grounding it takes to lead, how to strike the balance between people and performance, and how to lead with exceptional humility and humanity. As I was conceiving the themes of my book, looking to manage this collision leaders face between humanity and high performance, it seemed only natural that Paul be one of my very first calls. In this podcast, Paul speaks of the critical importance of trust, consistency, and follow-through, and leading with the guideposts of mission and values. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Paul Vivano.
Paul Vivano, old man, CEO veteran, president and CEO, Children's Hospital, Los Angeles.
So you started out as a CEO when you were 26. Now you're a couple years past 26. You must have seen an awful lot of changes in the nature of leading others and the realities of workforce today. So I'm very, very interested to hear when you hear about the things you have to face today and the most important ones like quiet quitting, social justice, inclusion needs, people bringing more of their own humanity into the workplace, maybe multi-generational issues that are, we've got more generations in the workforce than ever before, social media, outside pressures, all of that stuff. When you show up at CHLA in the morning, what are the ones generally, the factors that are most challenging and the most pressing on you?
So, there's a whole bunch of external factors in healthcare today that don't necessarily directly touch on the things you just outlined. Reimbursement pressures and trends, inflationary trends around workforce costs in healthcare, pharmaceutical costs, supplies, et cetera. And so the inflation is outstripping the reimbursement ability to keep up with it. There's a lot of pressure around kind of the short-term, day-to-day. How do you generate free cash flow? How do you build your balance sheet? How do you maintain your business? From that perspective, that does occupy a lot of time. And it's kind of an intimidating thought to think of how pressurized the healthcare delivery system actually is at the moment. My sense is it's very fragile, and a few more years of runaway inflation and either flat or slightly increased reimbursement for those who were dependent upon Medicare and Medicaid, declining reimbursement is likely to cause an access problem that will impact us as a country and ultimately impact the health of the communities that we serve in the whole country. And that gets sort of manifested in a whole bunch of different ways. The workforce issues that you referenced, generational differences, workplace expectations, productivity expectations, et cetera, is that the workforce of today is less likely to want to work overtime, spend more time providing care, being selfless, about time commitment, not about how great a job they're doing, but about the time commitments associated with it. Likely to lead to some real access problems going forward. So I think the healthcare system is, it's not a collision course, but headed for some rocky times. So that occupies a lot of the kind of just the mind share of how do we redesign the delivery system of tomorrow, given the financial pressures. There's not a lot of room for error.
And yet to create a new system requires slack time, labor, whatever, that you don't have the luxury of any extra.
Right. And investment. We don't have any extra of that either. And so how do you single yourself out as the organization among many where people can choose to work? What would make this an attractive environment compared to somebody else? And, how do you design that kind of real time with the stakes being high, quality of care, outcomes, sensitivity to the community?
My thesis, Paul, is that leadership plays a big part in creating the kind of place that people would want to come to, that it's part of the value proposition, They create the culture, they, kind of create that environment. What are the characteristics of the leaders that are most successful in this pressurized environment in your experience? What are they doing?
Yeah, well, so it sure evolved over the long career that you referenced. And so, kind of the command and control leader is less effective or maybe even not effective at all today in the environment. And so the quote, softer skills are in demand. And that includes empathy and listening and inclusiveness and shaping job descriptions and seeking input about how you do things, not just what you do. And so it's an enormous set of responsibilities today as team members look more to their organization to create an environment that they want to be attracted to that transcends just we provide great care. But there's a culture aspect to this, a welcoming culture, a safety part of it, being valued, not just as a professional, not just as a nurse or as a doctor, but as an ethnic group, as an affinity group. And so how do you create that culture where everybody feels welcome and valued and seen and heard? Those are things that are actively part of the environment today that we strive to create. And those weren't skill sets that many of us had 20 years ago, or pick your time frame.
That requires a different relationship between leader and follower, and a much more authentic one. It's not something you can fake. And I notice in watching you over the past, let's say, just last 20 years, which is a thumbnail of how long we've known each other, much longer than that. You have led by example. You've been a particularly great example of authentic connection, communication, warmth, empathy, concern, all while holding people to account, all while getting the organization to perform at its best. How do you do that? How do you strike that balance?
Well, it's the art and science of leadership today. And, there's no textbook for it. And, there are days when you spend most of your time listening, shaping, learning, listening. It is a matter of approach and it is a matter of perspective. And I really truly value your input in terms of what we're doing. And that becomes kind of the threshold to then set the expectations of now that we trust each other, now that you know that I value you, that I care about you, both personally and professionally, then we can get into the conversation about how many patients we treat, what the outcomes are, those kinds of things. But if you try to reverse that order, you're liable to have a workforce with a lot of pushback. This leveling of the playing field, willingness to listen, willingness to meet with everybody. It's equally important to meeting with your board members. You have to meet with your team members.
I noticed over the past 20 years or so, all the way back to your Alliance Healthcare days, communicating directly with people through town halls, through one-on-ones, through one-on small groups, all of that stuff's been an important part of your strategy. And my guess is it probably, back in the early days, made some people uncomfortable with how much you were willing to share and disclose and stuff. When I look around the workplace in healthcare and beyond, it seems like people are catching up to that. People are now expecting their leaders to bring a great deal more intimacy, a great personal sense of themselves that, again, 20 years ago, 25 years ago was not a thing. We didn't share quite that much of ourselves, and yet that seems to be one of the things that many in the kind of Gen Y, Gen Z kind of thing are expecting of their leaders. Would you mind commenting on that?
It's a two-way street. If you want people to be devoted to you, you're going to have to prove that you're devoted to them. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with about 10 team members who wish to be anonymous. Before the meeting, were concerned about an aspect of our culture that they wanted to share with me. And the fact that they were willing to reach out to me, knowing that it would be safe, knowing that I wouldn't disclose who was there, who said what, allowed us to have a great conversation. And for me to learn, and that's one of the things I open the meeting with. I want to be a better CEO. I want to be a better leader for you. And so help me understand how I can make sure you feel safe, seen, heard, whatever those circumstances were. And it's a hard thing to do as a CEO. It's a humbling thing to do.
I'd love to unpack this incredible story because that's a really great example. A group of 10 people with some concerns about the culture reach out to the CEO because they feel safe enough to share some concerns they have in the hopes that something can happen in a positive way. What are the antecedents of that? What allows that to happen? Why you, and what is it that you do that communicate that sense of safety to them?
Well, I think it's probably a long story. I think it relates back to that willingness to meet with people and to keep the confidence of them intact. So, I meet with roughly 10 team members every month and then 10 faculty members here every month. And, again, I start the meeting by saying, no one knows you're here. And I'm not going to attribute any quote to you. And I'm going to write some notes about the things you suggest or observe, because that's how I'm going to remember some of these things. But the fact that I've never disclosed about what anybody's ever said, word gets out. And so we have 8,000 employees. So what? This small town, word gets out really fast. If you betray somebody's confidence or suggest something that's inappropriate or do something that's inappropriate, word will get out. So I think it's that proving of you can trust me to keep this confidential. And because you reached out to me because other people have told you that, my job is to make sure that our team members throughout the entire organization, neurosurgeon to the person who helps park the cars and the valet, that I give them the resources to do their job and that I respect them, how hard their job is, that they're on the firing line. Don't question anybody's motives. And it takes time to build that trust.
I'm going to use a couple of my more academic words, and you can always pull me back on these. But it's demonstrated performance over time, as you say. It is creating a safe environment for them by I'm not taking notes. It's having the mindset of, I'm coming in to learn from you. And my job, my frame for my job is that it is to support and help you being as good as you can in yours. That's my stated role. Also, Paul, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about that little thing in your shirt pocket that always sticks out. That if that someday, Paul ever steps out of that office, that's going to be one of the things they're going to most remember about. What is that about, the pen and the note cards?
Well, one of the comment, Foster, about prior little discussion, it's this notion of, it sounds so simple. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And if I can't do it, I'll tell you why I can't do it. I'd like to do it, but here's why I can't do it. But here's what I can do. And then just, again, it sounds so simple, just doing what you said you were going to do, not for a day, not once, but for over a period of time, helps engender that trust. So the 3x5 card in the pocket, is very sophisticated. It's not a phone. It's not a smartphone. It's not an iPad. If I'm in a meeting and you say something that I need to remember or is very important, I'll write it on the 3x5 card. And before the day is done, whatever's on that 3x5 card is going to be accomplished. And because it's so important that it needs to be done in a timely way. And there'll be a new card tomorrow. Start with the fresh one. If you make it on the card, it's going to be done.
It strikes me that a lot of the things you're talking about, kind of basic goodness, following through on your commitments, listening with regard to other people, showing empathy and concern, helping them, working with mutual, none of this stuff's new.
No, my mother would be very proud of me.
Your mother would be very proud of you. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to take a stab here. Your sense of your role in your first CEO job might have been a little different than that. You probably have not, being a great human being is not anything new to you, but how much you can display that in the workforce might be different. I'm inquiring.
Well, I think it's a sign of a lot of things. It's a sign of maturing, and it's a sign of the times. When you're a young CEO or a young leader, you kind of have a lot to prove, and you want to prove your mettle. You want to prove your value, that you deserve the job. And so there are times when you have to perhaps act not the way you prefer, but the way the organization needs. As you see what's successful over your career, you do get back to these basics of this empathy, this leading with relationships, that honoring what's important to team members, to giving them the tools so that they feel successful, that they're working at the optimal of their ability to lead and to be successful. I think it comes with maturity, and the times have changed.
Paul, you've always been a big promoter, believer in collaboration. You've always paid a lot of attention to the kind of teams that you build, the people that you put on them that can play well with others. Some say that to approach and address the complexity of problems today really requires all of us. You've seen that in healthcare? Just this is a collaborative approach probably is really important now?
I think it's essential. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and it takes a level of maturity to say, okay, these are my strengths, these are my deficiencies, that I need to build a complementary team. You have to build a team that can complement you and create an environment where the decision making around enterprise-wide big picture decisions are made by that complementary team, so that you have all the perspectives. And so it's back to creating safety, feeling valued, everybody being at the table together, everybody feeling as if they're equal in terms of decision shaping.
Two follow-up questions, Paul. One is kind of the nature of this human approach to leading other people. It's not easy. That it on itself is not easy to do. It seems kind of nice to lean in and listen and ask and, inquire about one's pets or one's weekend. But there's a lot of hard work that goes on beyond that, behind it. Like nobody, as an example, you have a great grasp of dynamics in your industry. You know an awful lot of the critical levers that, can be played or maybe have never been played before, et cetera. But there's a lot of work that goes into allowing you to be open, flexible. Could you talk a little bit about that?
It's back to the balance. And so there is listening, and there is, trust building, and there's also setting the expectations really high. And if you're in a high performing organization, setting those goals, those expectations, shaping meetings so that there are KPIs, achievements, milestones, et cetera, that kind of get weaved into the conversation. It's not just all business, and it's not just all how'd your weekend go. Those things get blended and mixed together. And some days it's, 98% all business, and other days when it's, 25% family, and, it just depends upon the circumstances, time, pressures, all those kinds of things. Again, it's the art and science. The people who you lead to feel that I care about them personally, family, time, circumstances, and professionally, that I'm helping them develop their leadership skills so that they can aspire to be something bigger, greater, a CEO, whatever they're dreaming of. Your joke is, somebody better be following you. And, when you're the CEO, you're accountable for everything. You're accountable for the financial performance, the clinical performance, the culture, regulatory, legal, everything across the board. In your deposition someday, some lawyer's not going to ask, do you know the name of the kids of your legal counsel? Yes, I do. That's not going to be a question. My question is, did you comply with your compliance program in accordance with various laws? And so it has to be both. That development, that I'm going to help everybody who works with me or for me develop their career so that they can achieve what they believe is their optimal contribution to our organization or another organization. That's a gift, not from me. It's a gift for them to know that someone's looking out after their development to make them a better leader.
You've established, and I think rightly so, the relationship between feedback, which can sometimes be positive and sometimes not, feedback and personal development, feedback and growth, feedback. So what's that got to do with authenticity? What's the relationship between kind of telling the truth and authenticity in your mind?
Well, again, people can see through the baloney. And, if I'm not authentic in how I'm articulating that feedback, that concern, that genuine care, they'll see through it. I'm going to lead in a way that reflects that, me being authentic to mission, to values, to core beliefs, to leadership skills. And I'm not here to tell you the answer. I'm here to help you think about what the implications are of how you've led. Is there a better way to lead under those circumstances tomorrow? And that's not judgmental. That's understanding the implications. And if I'm judgmental, then I'm not authentic. I'm just telling you what to do.
I've got a couple final questions. One of them is there have to be limits to authenticity in the workplace. Where are the limits of authenticity between leader and follower in the workplace?
Well, I guess it depends how you think about authenticity. I can be authentic and say to you, listen, we haven't achieved what we've agreed to in the milestone or the time frame, or I think you should have approached this different. That's being authentic. It's not being less performance oriented. It's being, again, trusting, respectful, grounded in a mission, a strategic initiative, a vision, whatever it is you might be working on. And so I don't see those in conflict. I think I can be authentic. And, if you're home and your dog's running around the background, but you're getting everything done on time and things are going well, that's okay. If not, it doesn't matter if you're in the office. There's going to be a discussion about what can we do to make sure that we're achieving our milestones and our mutually agreed upon goals. That's being authentic.
But how has kind of this mental health conversation affected your workforce, and what do leaders do about it? People come in and say, I'm really not feeling it today. I'm feeling very down. And like, how do you lead at a scarce workforce where you're struggling for labor?
We've made an investment. So we do surveys of every team member, every physician, everybody in our enterprise. As an example, we have 140 general pediatric residents, and it's a hard time to be a medical resident for all the reasons that are obvious. And we surveyed them and listened to them, and we actually hired a dedicated psychologist for these 140 residents because that's what they needed. So that wellness component of the job, the wellness, the belonging, whether if that's affinity groups, EI efforts, whether if it's having psychologists, social workers, readily available, EIP programs, support internally and externally, meaning we've designed our health plan to have more affordable, more accessible outside psychologist support if that's important to you. So no copay. So we've designed things to try to be supportive of the evolving needs.
A real demonstration of your concern for your workforce.
And again, I wish we could do more. Still, the equation of we only have so many resources, and how do you allocate them? And no doubt the last 2 or 3 years, the vast majority of those resources are allocated to team members' needs.
Paul, my last question for you. You're a great consumer of information, knowledge. What are you reading these days? What are you listening to? What's informing you on this? Let's take it out of the kind of the technical and the economic realm, but reading anything good that's kind of giving you insight to these leadership challenges.
Well, I read a lot, and I'm lucky. I took a speed reading course, early in my educational experience. The news, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, whatever, glance through, whatever. The professional journals that are directly impactful in our work, Health Affairs, Modern Healthcare on the kind of the a little bit of the lighter side, keeping pace with the profession things. I think in terms of kind of how that gets complemented with some of the biographies about other leaders, how they've coped with circumstances.
Any favorite ones lately?
Nelson Mandela, Abraham Lincoln.
And it's interesting to me that the best leaders, of which I include you, and I consider you an important role model, are leaning into their people, are really regarding their people, are understanding the relationship between helping their people be great and the performance of the organization in this balance that you talk about. So, yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you do, and the wonderful mission of CHLA for the many kids you serve and their families, giving them hope. So appreciate it, Paul, and appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for being such a great coach over all these decades. We won't talk about how long, but
Nah,
it's been a while.
it's For a deeper exploration of your own journey, you can find tools, stories, and reflection questions in my book, Leadership: Rethinking the True Path to Great Leading, or by following me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram as Foster Mobley. Until next time, Stepwise.
Thank you for listening to Stepwise. Stepwise is brought to you by Dr. Foster Mobley. Edited and promoted by Zetis. You can listen to more episodes wherever you stream podcasts. Find out more at fostermobleymt.com or follow us on social media at Foster Mobley. That's FOSTERMOBLEY. We look forward to having an inspiring conversation with you soon.